Welcome to Functional Fourth Trimester, a podcast created to support new parents as they return to daily life after having a baby.
Each episode will talk through common postpartum challenges, share practical education and strategies, and hear from real parents and healthcare professionals along the way.
Whether you're listening during a feeding, a walk, or a quiet moment, this space is for you. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Melissa, and we're excited to jump right into today's topic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to be talking about all things sleep and the nervous system. Sleep when the baby sleeps. Have you heard this saying before? It sounds like a good idea, but in reality, what do you do when the baby is sleeping, but all you can think about is if they are still breathing, when are they going to wake up, should I be cleaning up the house, and so many more consuming thoughts. Sleep deprivation is a widely recognized experience of new parents during postpartum. So we know this is a very relevant issue, and more support and education is needed in this area. Before we introduce our guest for today, I wanted to give some background information. Sleep is essential to promote recovery from daily stressors, as well as for immune function and energy restoration. Infant sleep and feeding patterns, pain and complications from childbirth, and hormonal changes all likely contribute significantly to shortened, poor quality sleep in early postpartum period. Sleep is disrupted even before the birth of a child, as there can be chronic sleep disruption in pregnancy and acute sleep deprivation during labor. Sleep has been implicated as an important factor in postpartum mood and depression. A lot of parents describe a sense of being on alert for signs of infant distress and safety, which worsened their sleep. The most common reasons new parents face sleep disruption are their baby's sleeping and feeding patterns.
I am happy to introduce Kaili Ets. I've known Kaili now for about 6 years. She's a pediatric occupational therapist and holistic sleep and reflux specialist. If you know sleep and reflux, they're huge things when your baby is little. She has over 18 years of experience supporting infants and young children. She combines developmentally appropriate, evidence-informed strategies with a holistic lens and practical solutions so you can have better sleep, self-regulation, and function. She designed a framework based on the nervous system called the Rooted in Regulation Map. It looks at the root cause of symptoms like sleep difficulties. Welcome, Kaili, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, welcome, Kaili. We're so glad that you're here today and joining us. I would love if we can just start off with talking a little bit about, if you want to give a brief overview of that Rooted in Regulation Map and kind of how we can apply that specifically to infant sleep.
Yeah, so I would love to just talk a little bit about why I even came up with this framework and where this even kind of like was birthed, for lack of better words. So early 2025, my dad passed away somewhat unexpectedly, and I took a huge step back from my business. I had like no desire to create, teach, none of like the content stuff that I was doing before. Because I was grieving. And then when I finally slowly started to come back to wanting to offer more support, wanting to get back into teaching, I realized that I didn't want to keep adding more courses, more content on like all the things that I talk about in terms of babies and families. I wanted to really start to simplify everything that I was teaching into like one coherent kind of little umbrella thing. And so this is sort of where like that whole idea of this framework came from. Because so many families, so many of the challenges that families were bringing to me, like sleep struggles, feeding difficulties, delayed milestones, fussiness, they are actually all connected to how safe and organized a baby's nervous system feels throughout the day. Now, before we move on to like what this framework really is, I do want to be clear that this is not like a single cause like model. I'm not saying that this is like a replacement for all the other things that we know. for medical evaluation or like more structural type assessments or even following different like developmental frameworks. Medical conditions, anatomical differences, nutritional factors, all of the above have to be still considered. Do they really still do matter? This is just another lens. It's more of a capacity-based lens. And it helps us to understand why some of these struggles might be going on for babies, in terms of, you've tried all the tips and tricks and it's like not working for your baby, right? I want you to think about a tree, and this is sort of the metaphor that I use for this framework. So the branches of this tree are what we see. So the sleep difficulties, the feeding difficulties, the reflux, the motor delays, mood issues like that, fussiness and like the quote unquote colic, language delays. Maybe your child has difficulty playing independently once they get into like more of that toddler, later kind of toddlerhood. So those are the branches, and those branches could be like plentiful. Those are just some examples. The trunk represents how systems connect to support those branches. So like the body, oral motor coordination, sensory processing, the environment around us. And then the roots are where regulation really begins. So I have 3 roots, and again, this framework is like a work in progress. So it will probably evolve as I continue to think it through. But I have 3 roots. So safety and connection, embodiment and flow in the body, and then rhythm and predictability. And underlying all of that, or like maybe even more surrounding all of that, is the nervous system. So the nervous system is the baby's sort of ability to communicate, right? It connects the brain, the body, all the organs through constant signaling. At the very basic level, the nervous system is always asking, am I safe enough to rest, to digest, to grow and learn, to connect, or do I need to stay on alert? Like, oh, where's the tiger, right? So our primitive brain is kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is safe. So those are the 2 at a very basic level. When the system feels safe and supported, muscles can be softer and looser, digestion flows more smoothly, sleep comes more easily, development unfolds with more sort of flexibility and ease. When the system feels stressed or overloaded, we often see things like body tension, more frequent wakes at night, more reactivity, that fussiness, that colic, or just more difficulty or more effort with developmental kind of milestones like tummy time or rolling or crawling and things like that.
Kylie, I would like to hear what set you on this journey, your own, was it your own mom experiences?
Yeah.
What did you deal with as a mom that you wished you would have had help with or would have needed?
Yeah. So my whole journey into working with babies and toddlers started with my own child. 10 years ago, I had about 8.5 years of experience as a pediatric OT at the time. I had learned all the infant development, child development, all the things. I was so excited to be a mom. That was like my big goal in life. And then I had my son, and I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And it was really stressful. He hated tummy time. He didn't sleep for more than like 2 to 3 hour chunks. And that was really only if he was like attached to me. He hated the stroller. Um, I remember feeding him and trying to breastfeed, and I went to see lactation consultants and midwives and everybody. I had so much pain breastfeeding. My nipples were cracked and bleeding. I remember sitting, and so my background is Estonian, so this is like European kind of like old wives like remedies and stuff, right? I remember sitting in our little apartment in New York City with like my breasts like soaking in warm salt water so that they wouldn't be painful for the next feed, like crazy things like that. I was just totally exhausted, and I could not believe how hard motherhood really was. My baby had reflux. Like there was just so many things. I look back now on pictures from when I was baby wearing him, and he is just this like super rigid, tense baby. Like fists are clenched, super straight body. Like he just never, in any of the pictures in those early first few months, he never looked like calm. And I didn't know it at the time. It's just now that I've done all this learning to try to figure out why was it so hard, and really to just help myself figure out motherhood in general. That's where all this learning has kind of come into play, that I finally can see those signs. It was really hard, and I kind of thought like, oh my gosh, if I felt like it was hard with my baby and I was like so ready to be a mom. I had so much experience with babies and young children. It was like the thing that I did. But if I had so much difficulty, can you imagine those parents who are literally holding a baby for the very first time when they have their own child? And they have even more of a steep learning curve than what I had, because I had all this like knowledge and experience and practice, and I still was just totally rocked.
And you were a pediatric OT. You should know
It's,
everything, right?
I know.
Like it should all be fine.
Well, and that was part of it, right? I was like, why can't I figure this out? Like, I should be able to figure this out. I know the importance of tummy time. I know the benefits of baby wearing. I know the benefits of breastfeeding and all the different positions that I can try. Why is it not working? Right? And so it turns out that my son, who's now 10, for the last 10 years, he has a very sensitive nervous system. And even when he was a toddler, I felt like his nervous system was like fried for some reason. And I couldn't really explain it in any other way. There was just something about it. Like he was just always stressed, always anxious, always like, would just like go from 0 to 60 at the snap of a finger. And I couldn't figure out why. Like I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing all the natural things. You're getting enough movement. We go outside. Like I'm holding you. I'm like doing that, responsive parenting. Um, and so I just couldn't figure out why. And it turns out it's all these different things that are layered together. He was born via somewhat forced C-section. So he didn't get all of those nice, inputs and primitive reflex integration through the birth canal, right? He was very tight, as I mentioned, which I didn't know at the time. But there was all that body tension that was like increasing that arousal level, right? There was the difficulties with feeding, which turns out that he actually had a tongue tie that nobody knew about, and I didn't know what that was 10 years ago. And so feeding was really difficult for him. So he probably was getting a lot of air in. That's why he had the reflux. He also probably wasn't getting a full belly, which is why he was not sleeping very well. Add that to the digestive piece, add that to the body tension piece, add that to a child who has tactile and auditory sensitivities, and now you have this baby and this nervous system that cannot downshift. It cannot be calm. And we need to be calm in order to sleep, for example. Sleep is not a skill that we can teach necessarily. Sleep is a biological state. We have to shift from active to calm and rest. We have to feel safe enough. We have to be in a body that feels safe enough to let go in order to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Yeah, that's awesome. You kind of answered another one of my questions too, which is great. And one thing I did want to follow up
Mhm.
about is we were talking about like kind of some of the like signs that you now like reflect back on and we're like, oh, his, tight body, those kind of things. So are there
Yeah.
any other kind of like things parents should kind of be like looking out for that
Mhm.
maybe might indicate something's going on with the nervous system here?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, right? But definitely things like those rigid babies who just always want to be kind of straight and extended. If they're like really fisted in terms of their hands, a lot of times these babies are going to have open mouth posture, so their mouth is going to be open like for most of the day and also when they're asleep. Then it's also things like maybe they have a head turning preference. Maybe they hate tummy time like my son did. I could not figure out why. I was trying all the props and all the different positions and he just hated it. Maybe they have a lot of gas and their tummies are like really hard, right? And there's something about it that just seems so uncomfortable. Maybe they are only rolling to one side, or when later on, maybe they don't really ever crawl, or they have like a weird crawl, right? Where it's like one side of the body only. Maybe they have that flat head because they're looking always to one side and they're putting a lot of pressure on that. So those are, I mean, there's probably so many other signs too, but those are like big ones. Oh, another really telltale sign of like body tension and tightness is actually, you know how babies get those red creases in their neck and all that milk starts to collect there? That is a big sign that there is some body tension because they're just holding up their shoulders and their neck. It's like they don't really have a neck and everything is so tight up here. Can you imagine if you're walking around like this? Or not, they're not walking yet, but can you imagine if you're just like this all the time, what that does to your breathing, right? You can't do those big belly breaths. You can't access the, you're just like this and you're like, oh my gosh, right? And your nervous system is like up here. It's really that. So when your nervous system is very activated, then that means that your capacity to regulate is going to be much less. It's not going to have the flexibility and you're going to have less chance of regulation. This framework is like just another piece of the puzzle. You still have to rule out all of these other things. Like you have to look at the body tightness. Is there tension? What do we do about that tension? But this framework really is showing that like that body tension is a big piece of the puzzle. It is affecting the nervous system. And if the nervous system doesn't feel safe, then your baby is going to have more difficulty sleeping, feeding, just being regulated and calm throughout the day, right? And so it's like finding which part of that tree is kind of out of balance and supporting that part of the tree, and then everything else can start to work more in sync and the flow will be easier, which will then lead to better sleep, easier feeding, less reflux, more ease and flexibility in terms of meeting those milestones, right? And so it's really about looking at how can we help this baby's body find more ease and less effort. What does that look like? Rather than let's follow wake windows and make sure your baby's not overtired. That is important to a certain extent, but it's not the only thing, especially like I think I tend to see the babies who have a lot of things going on, right? Parents come to me when they're like, we've tried this and we've tried that and this helped a little, but it didn't really solve all of it. And then I come and I look at all these other things. Like I really look at the baby, the family as a whole. And I'm looking for that quote unquote like root cause, but it might not just be one thing that is causing all of it. But this is an umbrella that does kind of help us to look at one thing. Okay, maybe the nervous system is that one thing. Why is the nervous system not feeling safe? Why is that nervous system so activated? How can we help that baby and their body to just be calmer? What does that look like? And then we can go on to optimizing sleep and optimizing feeding and doing all these other things. But we as OTs also always learn that that just right state, right? We just need to find that easeful state. Otherwise, they're not going to be learning. You cannot learn when you are stressed. You cannot learn when your body is not feeling calm and safe. So that's where this is all stemming from.
Yeah, and I think it's so understandable too. Like, even if we think about just like us as adults, like when we're feeling stressed or on edge, like it's hard to sleep. So, like, imagine an infant who's got kind of a heightened nervous system, is feeling really tense, has kind of all those things that you talked about. Like, obviously, it's going to be really difficult for them to get good sleep. I wanted to thank our guest speaker, Kaili, for coming in and talking about her rooted in regulation framework and how the nervous system is so important with sleep. The following episode right after this, we are going to continue our conversation with Kaili and talk about some practical strategies and tips about what can you do if you're in the thick of postpartum and you're sleep deprived and you're needing some real practical tools and strategies. We're also going to specifically touch base about how to help calm your baby's nervous system down. So follow along for the next episode to hear some real practical tools and strategies. We're so glad you were here with us today, and we'll chat with you again next time.
I hope today's conversation gave you something practical to take into your day, or simply remind you that what you're experiencing is normal. Returning to daily life after birth is a process, and support matters.
However your day continues from here, be gentle with yourself. You're doing important work. Thanks for listening. We'll meet you back here next time.